The Duke of Sussex has visited Angola in support of landmine clearance.
Prince Harry followed in the footsteps of Princess Diana, who walked through the same minefield back in 1997.
Yeah, a new photograph of the Queen at her private Wiltshire home has been released, taken by Chris Jackson to mark the occasion. And we're joined now by the royal correspondent, Richard Palmer. Richard, good morning to you. Let's start off with Prince Harry, if we may. Of course, following in his mother's footsteps, Prince Harry, of course, over the last few years has had a lot of criticism for various things he has told the press. But this is almost like having the old Harry back, isn't it? Doing charity work as patron of the Halo Trust, following in his mother's footsteps.
It is. And, you know, one thing I was really interested in, Cameron, was that the British Embassy held a reception for him. And I don't recall that happening on his previous royal visits since he's quit official royal duties. And I couldn't really get to the bottom of it last night, but I wonder whether that shows there's a slight thawing between the British state and the Duke of Sussex. And I guess it could be the fact that he's there representing a British charity that has been doing important work in partnership with the Angolan government. But still interesting, I thought. And you're right, that's what I thought. This was very much like an old-fashioned royal visit by Harry, with one key exception, of course. The Royal Press Pack weren't invited. There is a new spirit of engagement in his camp now. I mean, he's got a new PR team and they're trying to engage with parts of the media that they really haven't wanted to speak to, or he hasn't wanted to speak to for a long time. But clearly it's not quite extending to inviting us all out there to cover him.
Maybe one day, Richard, maybe one day. And I think it is very interesting, actually, the point you made, because that also jumped out at me, the fact that Prince Harry had been invited to the British Embassy in Angola to speak to business leaders. It's almost like an old-fashioned royal tour. But the question I also couldn't get to the bottom of, and I think this is the key point, Dawn, is that who sanctioned it? Was it the ambassador of Angola who invited Prince Harry? Was the Foreign Office involved, and by extension the British government, and by extension, perhaps, His Majesty the King?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think there's some really interesting things happening now behind the scenes. Early days still yet, but it does seem as if there is a willingness for both officers to start speaking again, and maybe there's a proper family reconciliation on the way.
Richard, I mean, obviously, I expect, like Cameron was saying, I think there is going to be a reconciliation between Harry and the King, because obviously the King has been very poorly, so it makes sense for that to happen. But the fly in this ointment, and the one that is not involved in that meeting at the weekend, is his brother William.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I think it looks much more difficult there. I think the rift is much deeper. But even there, I've spoken to friends of William in the past, where I remember one saying to me, "Time's a great healer." Who knows? I think it's going to be a lot easier for the King to see him than for William to see him. And there are still many obstacles. He's still very concerned about the security situation, so he doesn't want to bring his family over. My personal view is that I think there might be a way to facilitate maybe a visit to Balmoral for the Sussex family, where they're behind a police cordon. There must be some compromise that they can come to, but this summer might be too early for that.
And of course, you mentioned that his staff appear to be having a change of tact in terms of engagement with the media, and I would argue, by extension, the British people, allowing people a bit more access, more information, and all the rest of it. But do you notice also a change in tack from Harry himself? He appears to be focusing perhaps more on philanthropy, his charity work, rather than, doing an interview like he did a couple of months ago with the BBC about his security situation, and again opening up the idea of more royal secrets. Do you think there is a change of tack from Prince Harry here?
Yeah, it looks that way. As you were saying, really, it's back to the old Harry. And that can only be a good thing, I think, for him, because I think he does need to get the British people back on side, and he's got a lot of work to do on that front. So it'll be interesting to see if there are more of these trips coming up in the near future.
Richard, obviously, this is... Sorry, Richard, this is obviously not a royal tour. This is Harry acting independently, although, you know, as you've both pointed out, we don't know how it's happened and who invited who. But it is notable that Meghan isn't with him. Recently, they have been joined at the hip. Meghan, as we know, is a very divisive character. How much of a problem do you think Meghan could be in a warming or a thawing of the relationship between the King and Harry?
Royal insiders are sounding the alarm. Meghan Markle is being tagged as a huge problem in Prince Harry's attempts to reconcile with the King. According to reports, one of the biggest obstacles isn't Harry's past, it's Meghan's role in the present. Tonight, we'll dig into why she's described as not trusted, what's really at stake, and whether the reconciliation is ever possible. After years of public fallout, whispers of reconciliation between Harry and King Charles began to surface. The Duke seems to be reaching across the divide. But the palace's reception? Lukewarm at best. One recurring message kept coming back. Meghan is the sticking point. In royal circles, trust is hard-earned and hard to rebuild. So while Harry walks into that meeting room, Meghan is the shadow sitting behind him. And that shadow, it's making the King uneasy. Let's be clear. The criticism isn't just about Meghan's public past. It's about perception, control, and symbolism. Royal watchers note that Meghan's influence over Harry threatens the image of independence the Duke once claimed. The message back at the palace: he may have left, but he didn't leave alone. And when negotiations are happening quietly, the biggest barrier isn't words, it's who's at the table. And Meghan's seat seems to be the problem. The monarchy thrives on discretion, duty, and tradition. When Meghan steps into the narrative, not just as a figure beside Harry, but as a driving force, royal insiders get anxious. They ask, who controls the story? Who benefits from the fallout? And who, ultimately, is loyal to the institution?
I think there are certainly people in the family who, still have a problem with trust. And I think Meghan coming into the family was the catalyst for a huge number of problems between them all. And yes, I think she's doesn't seem to want to come over to the UK. The problem for the King is that he's not seeing his grandchildren. That must be so heartbreaking for him. I think his mother was very good at keeping Fergie on board, for example. And, I think the King will have to try to get Meghan back on board so that they can operate as a family. But I agree, a bigger problem than Harry, I think, on that front.
Yes, of course, Meghan is focusing very much on her as-ever business in the United States. But of course, it's also today Queen Camilla's 78th birthday, Richard, and we've got this lovely portrait of her taken in Wiltshire. Do we know anything about what she's going to be up to today?
I think spending it privately, if I remember rightly. I was going to say about Queen Camilla, going back to Harry, it's always very evocative when he retraces Diana's footsteps. And it's clear from certainly social media, I think, that there's still a lot of feeling about Diana. There's still a lot of support for the memory of Diana there. And so I think that's still... Queen Camilla, I would say, is perhaps the most popular member of the royal family with the British press pack. She's been on a charm offensive for years, and she's...
Yeah, I agree with that.
I like her enormously. But the opinion polls suggest that she's still... she's more popular than Harry, Meghan and Prince Andrew, but not many other members of the royal family. Yes, still popular than most politicians, but people are still warming to her, I think, and Diana's memory still lives long for many people, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that just briefly, Richard. Do you think she will ever escape the shadow of Diana?
I don't think completely, no. I think I think many people in this country have come to accept her, and and accept the fact that he's a better king and was a better Prince of Wales because she was there to support him. And I think people get that, but I was speaking to a group of people yesterday, and there were still people talking about the conspiracy theories about what happened to her, and I think I think it's going to be very difficult for her to completely shed that controversy.
Okay, royal correspondent Richard Palmer, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I mean, it is interesting, the Camilla point. I think if you look at the opinion polls, younger people who perhaps didn't have a conscious memory of Princess Diana when she was alive have a more favourable opinion of Queen Camilla because they don't really know who Diana was, essentially, and the whole controversy around that marriage breakdown. But I do get Richard's point, though. When I'm on an engagement, because I'm usually a royal correspondent, Dawn, with Queen Camilla, she always smiles and waves and says hello. She acknowledges your presence.
I was very lucky enough to have met Diana, interviewed her a couple of times when the boys were very, very little. And you know, and obviously it was horrible covering all that stuff that happened at the time, but I actually think Camilla's doing an amazing job. At the very least, she's doing an amazing job of supporting the man she loves. Can't really ask much more than that, especially considering what he's going through at the moment. Yeah,
absolutely. She is certainly his rock.
If Meghan is seen as rewriting history or leveraging it for media gain, the reconciliation becomes less about healing and more about damage control. For Harry, the choice is stark: cling to his past identity as a royal son, or embrace a new brand as a public figure. But he can't have both. The palace sees someone returning, but returning with unresolved baggage. Meghan's presence complicates things because it sends the message: this isn't just a family matter, it's a media affair. And when the line between monarchy and brand blurs, trust fades. So what now? If Harry truly wants reconciliation, the path must be silent. No headlines, no Netflix deals, no public commentary, just humility, service, and consistency. But with Meghan's profile and agenda already set, insiders fear that what we're seeing isn't reconciliation, it's repositioning. And for King Charles, the question remains: can the monarchy trust this team? Because trust isn't given, it's earned. And right now the ledger is empty. The reconciliation between Harry and his father isn't simply about forgiveness, it's about alignment with the crown's values. And Meghan's perceived side role may be the tipping point. Do you believe Meghan is the real obstacle? Or is this story about much more than one person? Share your thoughts below. Subscribe for more fearless royal commentary, deep dives, and the truths insiders don't want you to hear.